This is CHSR 97.9 FM here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. This is Python's Paradise, your film and music show, and this is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena. And folks, I grew up with Benji, the fluffy, lovable dog. I would have been 2 years old when the original movie hit theaters in 1974. And I happen to have the talented director behind the film and the series with me on the phone. I welcome the wonderfully talented Joe Camp. How do you do, Joe?
Hi, Greg. How are you?
It's an honor to talk to you. You bring back a lot of memories for me.
Well, I appreciate that very much, and I am happy to be here.
Yes. It's funny because we don't have drive-ins here anymore, but I remember seeing Benji at the drive-in with my family when I was young. I don't think I saw it at 2 years old, mind you. It must have been a re-release, but
surely, if you remember it, that means you were a little older.
Yeah, well, drive-ins always did retrospectives and stuff too, so yeah, Benji was one of those films, and then we'd watch it every year on television, so yeah. I just gotta know, like, I know you work with horses and you work with Benji. You must have a real love for animals.
Well, yeah, and I always wonder about people who don't. You know, I don't know how you can avoid that if you spend any time around them. You know, dogs, cats, horses.
I have a kitty.
Elephants. You know, I've always wanted 2 elephants.
I love elephants.
Anytime there's an opportunity, one shows up here, or we're passing through a town with, elephants out for photos with kids or things like that. You know, I go and just stand by them and commiserate.
Yeah.
They are. Every time I bring it up, Kathleen says, think about the amount of hay and the amount of poop that you're going to have to be cleaning up. But there's not much chance where we are that we would ever have one. But I'd sure love to have a couple of them because they seem so very sweet and so misused so often.
Yes, elephants are fantastic. Apparently, I read online somewhere they're the 4th smartest animal on the planet.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yep, the only ones ahead of them were chimpanzees, bottlenose dolphins, and orangutans.
That's amazing.
Yeah, elephants incredibly smart. I understand that trunk. They say it can pick up a 500-pound piano.
Holy moly, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I read that somewhere.
And sling it across the room, no doubt.
I watched a video where somebody was trying to get an African elephant to move off the path with his Range Rover, and the elephant wasn't having any of that, and he just flipped that Range Rover over.
Oh, my word.
Like it was nothing. Like I've seen them put the run to hippos. I've seen them put the run to rhinoceros. I mean, they're a powerful animal.
Yeah.
Yep. But what personalities they have as well.
They do.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't think I've ever seen an elephant up close, So, but I do love exotic wildlife.
They're the ones that I've been around, which are not that many. But that's literally what I remember. The last time I think is we went to a fair down in we lived out in California, San Diego Fair or something was there, and they had an elephant there that they were letting kids come and they would put them up on the elephant's neck, right behind the head, and then take pictures, and you could buy the picture or something. I don't remember what it was, but our kids wanted to participate in that. So while Kathleen was wrangling that, I just got up by the elephant's head and just stood there. We looked at each other and looked at each other into each other's eyes and whatnot, and it just, it brought tears to my eyes because, the elephant seemed so sweet and seemed to be communicating, very well, but, there he was. That was his job, and it just kind of broke my heart. there's an actual elephant sanctuary probably 50 miles from us here in Middle Tennessee.
Okay.
That is, they take in circus animals, circus elephants, and things like that. Elephants that need a home and need to live their lives out as they should be living. And it's a wonderful thing that they do. The thing I have problems with is that they will not allow in any way, shape, or form people to see what's going on. You can't. There's no place that you can stand and watch them. There's no place that you could, just commiserate with them a little bit or anything. And I think they've taken the whole thing in the wild. We have several Mustangs ourselves, and yes, they are horses that live certain ways in the wild, and we try to replicate that as closely as we can. Ours are out 24/7. They have access to a barn if they want to use it, but it's their choice. And we feed them twice a day, but what we're feeding them is very natural stuff, and then they have grass and hay in the pastures, and they're calling their own shots pretty much. But that's not to say that their life was better out there in the wild than it is here in communication with humans.
Yeah.
Because we care for them a lot, and all of our horses, we have 7, all of them are at liberty all the time. We almost never have a halter on any one of the 7. They will walk with me anywhere I want them to walk. They will go wherever we want them to go. They'll come when we call them in the pasture. And the time that we spend with them down at the barn during feeding time and so forth, they're all totally loose and at liberty and know where they're supposed to be when it's time to put the food bowl down. And their lives, emotionally speaking, I would suggest, or even better than it is out in the wild, because they're being able to learn things that they wouldn't learn in the wild and replicate those things and get praise or a treat for it. And so they're all happy campers. So it's unless you get inside their head, it's probably impossible to know. But I feel kind of the same way about the elephant sanctuary. Properly managed. They lived their entire lives up until this point with humans. Granted, in most cases, probably really bad humans. Yeah. But they also seem to be very forgiving animals, and just missing that I would think is taking something out of their lives. That it's great for them to be able to wander around this sanctuary, free and never seeing any humans. But I would think that they probably miss that somewhere deep inside.
Yeah, you did a book called The Soul of a Horse. Talk about the process of writing that.
Well, I have often wondered, what people think, that I had the audacity or the gall to, a year and a half into horses, literally, I started writing on this book. Mm-hmm. But it just astounded us because we wound up with 3 horses. I've always loved horses, and I have been around them some over the years. And I've gone on trail rides and the usual thing. But I have spent enough time with them, other than just riding and that sort of thing. Where I just, I've really, I think somewhere deep down I always wanted it, and an opportunity came. We moved in California. We moved out to this house that had 3 stalls on it. And it was sitting on top of this hill down in Southern California. And down below that were these 3 open horse stalls. It wasn't a barn or anything. They're just horse stalls with a lid over half of the stall or whatnot. And we'd sit out there and have a glass of wine at night and watch the sunset over the mountains into the ocean and say, wait, wouldn't it be nice if there were a couple of horses wandering around in those stalls down there just to add to this picture postcard we're looking at?
Yeah.
And so one day Kathleen drug me out of bed, and it happened to be on my birthday, on the day of my birthday, and so I was suspicious from the start. But she drug me out and said, "Get in the car, we're going somewhere." And I said, "Where are we going?" She said, "You'll see." And so we get in the car and we drive down the hill into the edge of Escondido, and she pulls into this park. And in the park, there's a big horse trailer with 3 horses tied outside the trailer with saddles and everything on. And she said, "You know, you mentioned the other night that you would love to go on a trail ride sometime. Today's the day. Happy birthday." And literally 2 weeks later, we owned 3 horses.
Should you go do the same with elephants?
I hope not. I mean, I would be awfully, somebody came in with an elephant that needed rescue and there was nowhere for him to go. I'd open the gate and say, "Turn him loose." Kathleen would have a coronary, but we would, I will not go out and overtly look for that. And I did at one point Google it, and the only elephants that I could find that were actually available, like for sale or something, were really expensive. I've forgotten now how expensive, but they were really expensive.
I bet.
So that kind of shut down my little crazy dream there for a moment. But anyway, the back to your question. So what we found, because we didn't know, we were clueless about horses.
Mm-hmm.
And so all we had was what we were asking people who knew, quote, supposedly knew something about horses. What were we supposed to do? How are we supposed to, treat them, feed them? What kind of lifestyle do they need, and so forth? And it began to, we talk about it at night, and some of the stuff that we've been told to do. I mean, we had all 3 of them living in stalls down there, in those 3 stalls that I mentioned earlier. And they were literally living in those stalls, and they got to come out and go down to the round pen or the arena every once in a while when I was trying to figure out what we're supposed to do about training them and getting relationship with them and all of that. But all the stuff that we were being told really just wasn't making a whole lot of sense. And so finally I started digging. I got told that horses' feet would crumble and break up, and you'd have misery on your hands if you took them onto asphalt and concrete without horseshoes on. And one of the 3 of those horses that were mine happened to come to us with shoes on his front 2 feet, but nothing on his back 2 feet. His back 2 feet looked great. They looked, just terrific. And so I said, how come I have a horse and he's got shoes on, 2 of his feet, but not on all 4 of his feet? And I don't know, but you got all this concrete around here. You better get shoes on all 4 of those feet. And so before we did anything like that, I said, I started Googling and searching out, websites and historical things about the horses that are in the wild. I'm not even sure I knew horses were still in the wild, but found that they were. And so I went in and found people who'd spent time out there and just started really soaking it up and soaking up what these people were saying about how horses should live and how they should eat, and etc. And what we began to find out is that everything we were doing was diametrically opposed to what their genetic development would be calling for. Because the horse is a natural prey animal, a flight animal. They are prey. That's all. They have no way to deal with a predator other than run. And if they get the message quick enough, they can usually outrun even cougars for a short distance. And the cougars will give up and go away. And wolves, that sort of thing, when they're in the wild. And and so the they they are genetically designed to live in herds, for safety. Not because they're all big buddies and they want to be with their friends. It's just a safety issue, a natural genetic safety issue. When a horse is surrounded by 3 or 4 other horses, even if he doesn't like a couple of them, he'd rather be there than away from them. And they are, they move when they're in the wild. They move 10 to 20, 25 miles a day, searching for food, searching for water, avoiding predators, etc., etc. And so their bodies have grown up. The northwestern section of the United States, and probably, I haven't researched this, but probably on into Canada, into your part of Canada, probably, is where horses evolved for millions of years, and they've got the archaeology to back all of that up, the various stages and so forth. And then they crossed the Bering Strait thing, when it was a solid piece of land or ice or whatever it was back then, and wandered it off into Siberia and going around and finally populated the entire world over time.
Yeah.
But they all come from right in that area, and the way they were evolved, they are very definitely movers and shakers. They are intended to move a lot. It's part of their digestive system. It's part of their skeletal system, muscular system, to get a lot of movement and to be eating virtually constantly. If you ever have watched a horse who is free, who's out in a pasture or something, he's got his head down 90% of the time, unless he's taking a short nap on all 4 feet, which they do. And the reason for that is that that's the way their systems are designed in there, to be munching little bits of grass or grass forage, grass hay, virtually around the clock. And their digestive system is not like ours. Ours cuts on and off depending on the presence of food. Theirs runs 24/7 without ever turning off. And so if there's not something there 24/7, or pretty much 24/7, that digestive acid is still there, still building up, and so what does it work on but the horse itself? And that's where ulcers come from. Ulcers in a stall, where a horse is only being fed twice a day, and the rest of the time he's standing around, where he's moving instead of 8 to 20 miles a day, he's moving 800 steps. Somebody did a study on how many steps a horse takes that's in a 10 by 10 stall over the 24-hour period, and it came out on average to around 800 steps is all the exercise that he's getting normally when he's in a stall. And of course they like we, are not supposed to be eating tons of sugar or anything that turns to sugar when it goes into the body. And that's what almost all of the feed in the bag, is. It's grain, it's corn, it's oats, it's, that kind of stuff, and molasses in there, and that kind of stuff. So everything we were doing, which is the opposite end of the stick, as to what that animal, genetically speaking, was really wanting, and the stress factor of being locked in a stall away from the herd, not moving, not being able to eat around the clock, alone, just the stress aspect of all of that. Well, we know, what stress does now. Finally, the medical profession has gotten very wise to that many, if not most, of our physical problems are caused because of stress of some kind, and the things that stress releases in the body. And so, anyway, to make a long story longer, I guess, that we began to stare at each other over dinner, saying, "Are we crazy? Are we nuts? we got these horses down there, and they are living exactly opposite of the way that they should be living. And I dug a little bit more, and the things that we were beginning to find out, and the things that we could do with our little place that we had there, we started doing, and we got them out of the stalls, and at least got, at that time we were probably up to about 5 or 6 horses, and we had I don't know, 2 paddocks off of those stalls that are probably no bigger than a large barn as a footprint. But we were able to divide, them into 2 completely different paddocks and put, 3 horses in each one, and take hay out morning and night and put it out in small piles all the way around the perimeter of the thing. So they were having to move, they were having to play, musical chairs, so to speak, with the hay piles, and so they were getting movement, they were eating around the clock, and that was something. And we got the shoes taken off of them. I called the vet and I said, the shoes are going to come off these horses. And he said, which one? I said, all of them. He said, well, don't you think you want to just try it with one and see if it works, and then maybe do another one and whatnot? I said, no, this is the way they're genetically born to live. And I was being told that the genetics had changed so much from the wild into domesticity that the domestic horse was no longer even related to the horse in the wild, genetically speaking. And I joined a science, AAAS, American Association for the Advancement of Science, organization. They had a deep, archives where you could go on any subject. And so I jumped ship from horses into genetics and stuff like that, and went in there, and come to find out that it would take 5,000 years minimum, probably more likely 8 to 10,000 years, to even begin to change the base genetics of any species, a horse or a person or anything. And which means that horse in the backyard is exactly in most instances, the very same genetics as the horse that's in the wild out there today and was in the wild out there, 20,000 years ago. And they have found horses in the Alaskan permafrost that are that they've gone into the genetics on, and they had enough stuff in the permafrost left over there. They could do DNA checks, and they have, and come back and compared them to the domestic horses today, and there is this, like 0.5% average difference in that horse from 25,000 years ago and today's horse. So that told me all I needed to know, and I told the vets, no, they're coming off of all of them. They're coming off today. And we did. We pulled shoes on them, and it took some of them a while to regrow and to get healthy in the feet, because the hoof is supposed to flex every time it hits the ground. Mm-hmm. And that flexing is like a little small heart. It sucks the blood into the hoof capsule, which I always thought was just a big wad of fingernail or something. But no, it's very complex, and bones and veins and everything. And when it flexes, it sucks blood into that capsule, and then when the hoof comes off the ground again and it contracts, it shoves it back up the leg. So it helps the heart. A horse that is barefoot will actually, on average, have a 10% lower heart rate than a horse that has shoes on, because the heart on the horse that is barefoot doesn't have to work as hard, because that's got 4 other little hearts working for it in the feet. And so, you know, that was number one. The shoes came off. They got out of the stalls. They got into situations where they would be moving the bulk of the day and doing it with grass hay. And we got the sugar out of their diet, etc. And as all of this was taking place and it was working dandily, I mean, my horse, the one with shoes on the front and not on the back, when they came off the front, you'd have thought, you know, he'd been taken to the fair or something, because he was just, I don't think I've ever seen a horse smile except that moment. He was a happy camper, and he was good to go right from the beginning. But because the hoof on some of them was so ill from having that shoe on for so long, one of them had to actually regrow an entire hoof. Took 8 months, and so, you know, we put boots on him if we ever took him out to ride. We did not leave boots on him when he was just out on in the paddocks, because we wanted that movement to really get in full, and we wanted it to become as natural as possible as he was getting over it. And he ultimately did, and he was great. And so all of that, you know, I just said, I gotta do something. I mean, people don't know. You know, I talk to people all the time who swear that they love their horses to death, but they don't know any of this. You know, they know what, like we were being told, you know, this is the way you do it, it's the way it's always been done, and you don't question it. And the guys were telling me when I was saying, well, what about the horses in the wild? They don't have any shoes on. I said, they don't, you know, there's no relationship between the genetics between those anymore. And I found that to be wrong, and began to say it. And our vet, I've always used our vet as kind of the needle on the graph or whatever, as the guide on it. Because when we came in and I started pulling shoes and all this kind of stuff right in the beginning, you know, he was probably 10%, well, I'll listen to what they're talking about, and 90% thinking we were completely raving nuts. But when we left California and came to Tennessee, I took him to lunch and we had a long conversation, etc. And by that time, he was 90% in, if not 100%. He was recommending to people who had horses that they get the shoes off of them, get them out where they can move, and live more naturally, etc., etc. And, you know, I was just tickled to death on that. But that's how. I mean, because I became very passionate about all this, and I can write about it. And the book is not, it's not a preach book or a, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 book. It is the story of our discoveries as we came through it, and some of the jumbled up messes we were in because we didn't have a clue what we were doing in the beginning, and the repartee between Kathleen and myself, which often got very hysterical. And so it reads more like a novel than it does a book on how to care for your horses. But we were very fortunate that Random House wanted it, and they published it, and it became a national bestseller. And
it's fantastic.
And paved the way for all the others that followed it, and so forth. And I went back to Random House with our second one and said, you know, I got another book. I said, what's this one about? I said, oh, that's what we've learned since. And, oh, no, we got a horse book. We're happy with it. So we basically went into self-publishing from that point on. I wanted to get this stuff out and keep the flow of it coming out so that people, and I think we're very blessed because we were able, I mean, we have been able to make a huge difference for the better in the lives of thousands of horses all over the planet because of the internet being what it is.
Yeah.
And the book is sold well in Australia and New Zealand and South Africa and UK and various and sundry other countries.
Did you ever think about raising zebras, working with zebras?
No.
No?
I see people who do, and I say no. They are different enough species. They're not like a donkey. I mean, they're not so different as a donkey. And people have said that to me about that. I said, well, why don't you have some donkeys or some minis or this or that? I said, listen, I have spent 10 years learning everything there was to learn about these horses, and I don't want to start over. Sorry. And they are different. I mean, the donkeys are for sure, and the minis are. They're different. I don't even know for sure how a mini ever came into existence, but it wasn't, I don't think, a natural process. Anyway, and I do know people who, I know one particular trainer that has a couple of zebras, and she's done great with them. But for me, it's not the continued, okay, I reach this plateau, I go to this plateau, I go to this plateau, and I'm getting better at all of this and everything. My mission has always been just get the information out there and break the ice and get people to thinking about how their horse should actually be living, trying to figure out how to do that. And a lot of people have said, well, what if do you train horses on the sides? I said, no, I train ours, but I don't do that, and I'm not a clinician running around the country, putting on clinics, stuff like that. I'm just a really passionate guy with some information that a lot of people need, and a lot of horses need. So that's not really unlike the entire Benji process that we had, because all of that spurned out of
little fluffy dog,
my emotion and my love for Lady and the Tramp when I was a kid, and a curiosity wondering if it would be possible to create a story, a film with real dogs that didn't cross the line. In those days, there was no such thing as CGI, so they couldn't talk, like they can now.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to go to Rex Allen, saying, now Benji, thinking that he had to do such and such. But we kind of pushed it into the corner until I started really paying attention to our little dog, which was a little Yorkshire Terrier whose name was Benji. His papers said Sir Benjamin of Courtenay was his papered name. So we had always called him Benji. That's how it really was born. Is I got my first wife Carolyn, who died of sudden cardiac arrest in 1997, and I were in the kitchen talking through all of this, and she said, I don't think it's possible. And I said, yeah, you're probably right, because it's going to be hard to tell a story without words or talk.
But yet it worked.
And so she went to bed that night, actually, and I stayed up to read some, and Benji would be on my lap, and a dog would bark down the street, or a siren would go off, or somebody would blow a horn somewhere, and I got to watching the way our little Benji would react, and you could always tell what kind of interest there was, and what it, was it shock, or was it just normal interest? And so I got down on the floor and started doing some really crazy stuff that I'm glad nobody was there to photograph. And I'd get in the corner and huddle all up like in a fetal condition and say, oh no, and this dog would look at me like, what is the matter with you? Crazy? And I saw that dogs do talk. If you're really up close and personal and paying attention, they expressively can do what it takes words for us to do with, And so that changed everything. And I was working on a project. I worked for an advertising agency at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but at night, I mean, in the mornings, I would get up at 4 in the morning and write from 4 to 6 on scripts, because that's where I wanted to go. And I had a couple of friends that were art directors down at the advertising agency that had some of the same crazy, dreams or ambitions. And so we would more or less write together, talk together about a given little story or project or something at lunchtime. Then I'd go home and go to bed early and get up and write about it the next morning, and then bring that in, and then we'd go over that and that kind of thing. And that went on for several years, actually. But that's so the passion was always headed in that direction, but it came out of the emotion of me and in films like Lady and the Tramp, and wanting to really do something that and then it became, it just grew when the concept of doing this with a dog, and in effect letting the dog be the three-dimensional character,
Yeah.
the people be the props, because even in the old Lassie movies, Rin Tin Tin and whatnot, the dog is more or less a prop. Your heart's always with the kid who has to get rid of the dog because he's eating the chickens or something.
Yeah.
You're not following the story through with the dog and how he feels and reacts and interplays with it and so forth. And it became a very emotional thing for me, and because I in effect was the dog and doing what I felt the dog would do. I mean, there's a scene in one of the old Lassie movies where Lassie is under a tree.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bobcat or a cougar or something up in the tree, and Lassie doesn't know the cat is there. And at one point, the cat, snarls and does one of those kind of things. And Lassie turns and looks up at the cougar. That's not what would happen.
No.
If a dog heard something like a cougar or a bobcat squall at it, everything would go. The feet, the body, everything would tense and turn and look. And so the concept became one of either recreate the emotion that the dog is responding to so that it will look for real,
Mm-hmm.
or eliminate the parts of the body that won't go with the flow, that are the keynote to the fact that he's just being called by a trainer, and so that's the way we did it. That's the way the whole Benji movie was done. It was done with literally replacing the emotion, which is what an actor would do. An actor who's got to cry because somebody just died is going to be thinking about somebody he knows that died, or putting himself in the position so that the emotion will come naturally. And so that's what we were doing a great deal of the time. And I'll never forget, there's a scene in the original Benji
Mm-hmm.
when he's been kicked out of the house. He knows where the kids are. He knows what the deal is, and he can't. People always wanted us. Side note, they always you've got to, in your press kit for the original movie, you got to have a story synopsis. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. So you have to. Everybody always has one, and the media wants it. Blah blah blah. I said, nope, not going to do it, because this movie was not about kids being kidnapped and saved by a dog. This movie was about a dog struggling to try to accomplish something that dogs normally could not accomplish.
Yeah.
And going through all of the misery of not being able to accomplish that. And this one scene I was talking about is where he's been kicked out of the house. All hope is lost. He can't get their attention. He can't get them to see that he knows where these kids are.
Mm-hmm.
And he's walking along the streets of town that is normally his, where he goes every day to see people and get his bone, all of that.
Yeah.
And he's just moping like crazy, and the music is really sad and really pulling at your heartstrings.
Yeah.
We go to this shot that's a very high overhead, where Benji is just almost a dot down there, and the music is screaming. He's just nothing else. It's an old alley, grumbly old alley, and there's no other movement or life in it anywhere. And Benji is pointing out, as much as anything else, how alone he was from an emotional standpoint. And Frank Inn, the trainer, who was the world's greatest ever,
Mm-hmm.
was just screaming and yelling at him. Get your head down, you! Shame on you! You should just cut down. Get down, you! And he was walking, backwards about 40 or 50 feet in front of the dog, so that he was out of frame. And we were doing a rehearsal, and I told the operator, we were in one of these cherry pickers.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a crane. We couldn't afford that in those days. But it was just, rented from the utility company or something. One of their cherry pickers to get up there on a high box and take that. And so I asked him to let me down to the ground. And I walked over to Frank, and he said, "What's the matter? You're not getting what you want?" I said, "Yeah, that's exactly what I want, Frank, but I cannot let you do that anymore. My heart is breaking, and everybody in town can hear you." And he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "The way you're talking to that dog, no wonder he's so sad." He said, "Why don't you do what you do and let me do what I do?" And he called Benji over and said, "Come here, Benji." Benji goes, "Trot, trot, 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 trot. Get your head down." And man, you thought he'd lost his last friend. And at the minute he said, "Okay," the dog knew what he was doing.
Okay.
He's been paid for it over and over, and said, "That's a good dog. That's a good dog." And so by this point, he knew that that's when Frank talked that way. That's the way he's supposed to look. And he just shook it off and started scratching his ear when he said, "Okay." And I was just blown away. Well, not the last time either, but so that kind of a camaraderie and a communication between the trainer and the dog is really went a long way towards accomplishing what we were able to accomplish, in that movie, because he did understand, and he was just smart as a whip. When he got to the point to where we had to carry a 3.5-ton air conditioner around with us wherever we went, with a big hose and a little box on the end of it, because we were shooting in the middle of summer in Dallas, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And a dog whose tongue is hanging out a foot is not going to be acting. He's
No.
going to be panting. And so every time we weren't shooting, Benji was in the air conditioning. It didn't take him long to understand that when I said cut, that means the shot is over and he would relax. But when I said cut and print, you turn your head and he was gone to the air conditioning.
Yeah.
He'd go straight over wherever it was, find it, and crawl up in that little box, wait for the next shot. Frank got up the first time that happened, that we had noticed. "Where's my dog? Where's my dog? What happened to my dog?" And one of the grips said, "Frank, your dog's smarter than you are. He's already in the air conditioning." But it was a great experience, and that first one, I believe, was definitely the first movie that had ever been done like that had ever been done, completely from the animal or the dog's perspective and emotion and etc. And the three-dimensional character was the dog.
Well, I love the idea that he goes through the neighborhood and sees the woman, chases her cat under the tree, sees the mailman or the cop or the guy that gives him the bone outside the diner. Yeah. And then I always loved it when we climbed up around the house and on the roof and went all around the house, and went in that little broken window and went all through the house. Talk about those locations.
Well, it's interesting because the original, that night
Mm-hmm.
that I was telling you about, where I was up with my dog and realized suddenly that dogs do talk with their faces and their attitudes. If you're paying attention to it. I got up the next morning at 4, and I was writing on a screenplay of some sort. I don't even remember now what it was, but I just shoved everything aside and wrote the entire treatment.
Okay.
Literally, when it was typed out days later, because I couldn't type that fast, I was actually writing it in longhand. It was about 8 pages. And I was lucky if I could get 2 pages in that 2-hour period from 4 till 6 of script, which is not text.
No.
By a long run. It's a lot fewer words on a screenplay page than there is on just a prose page. But I did the entire treatment, call it, or story, that one morning,
Mm-hmm.
running into Carolyn and woke her up and said, I got to read this to you. And she said, no, just give it to me and I'll read it. And I said, no way, you can't read this because it's scribbled. I mean, she knows my handwriting. She said, all right. And so I sat there on the edge of the bed and read it to her. And when I looked up, there were tears coming down her cheeks. Sorry. And I said, well, I think we've got it. But that was set in an inner city setting.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of down in the alleys and the whatnot of some inner city. I don't know why. I mean, that's just the way it came out. And at the same time, we were searching for, or not at the same time, because it was a couple of years later when nobody in Hollywood was interested, etc., that we finally got the money put together to do it ourselves. And by that time, I'd moved from the advertising agency to a film production house that did commercials and industrial films and things like that. That in the advertising agency, I was not supposed to be involved in creative and film production and so forth. I was an account executive who wrote some copy, but I wound up, we had a little account called City of Denton, Texas, which is a little town just north of Dallas, Fort
Mm-hmm.
Worth, that had an industrial development program, and they were the lowest, the least amount of budget client that we had, and I was new on the totem pole in the advertising agency. So, I drew that client because nobody else wanted to mess with it. And the second year, what we had done in the first year had been very successful, and it was very unique, different. I won't bore you with it all, but the next year, I felt that they had reached a point where we needed to do a film and take it on the road.
Yep.
You go from town to town and have business people come in, on the East Coast and the West Coast who needed or might need in the future a good centralized location in a small town with 2 universities and lots of smart people around, and etc. But their entire budget for the whole year at the agency level was less money than it would cost to go out and get this film done on a professional basis by some film company. So I pitched to them that I and our print production guy, who had taken football movies for his coach on top of the press box during high school years,
Mm-hmm.
it was a little about cameras, would do it for him on the weekends. It was a 10-minute film, and it took 13 weekends to get it shot and reshot because we did a lot of that and whatnot. But so along that line, film, I wound up doing another one for the agency because one of their clients saw the Denton film and decided he wanted something like that, and so they let me go off track again and do that. And we had a little more money, so we worked with a local production house for editing and stuff like that at the end. And we made some really bad mistakes, but we got them covered up before it was all over with. And that place called me up and said, we would like to offer you a job. Anybody who can take that mess that you brought in here and make a real film out of it, you imagine what you can do if you knew something. And so I had gone over and started doing television commercials and so forth for them.
Talk about that house that where the kids were kidnapped in.
Well, that's I was trying to get there. Thank you.
Yeah.
For bringing me back. And so while we were, raising money and really seriously going to go after this production 2 or 3 years later, Carolyn and I were looking for to take an old, really neat but old house. It was cheap, and restore it, move into it, and restore it over time.
Okay.
And just a bent. And we were up in McKinney, Texas, which is well north of Dallas, doing that, looking at houses. And we'd found this old one. I mean, there was nobody in it. Grasses. It's the house that you saw in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And on the front of it was basically untouched, except for the window pane that we replaced and broke out and whatnot for Benji to come in and out of. But we walked into it not with it being a movie set, just being something we might be able to buy. And while we were, we wandered through it, and it looked pretty much like it looks in the film. That's what was there. There wasn't much in it in the way of furnishings, but it was there, and we found our way into it. We just wandered around and figured out somehow. I don't know if there was a for sale sign on it or what, but we found out who owned it, and they had just bought it for the same reason that we were out looking to move into it and restore it and whatnot. And on the way home, before I had talked to any of these people or anything, Carolyn, we were talking about the house, and she said, it would be a great location.
Yeah.
Benji.
Yeah.
So no. I mean, Benji's inner city. It's got that earthy feel, and all these reasons for trying to make her believe that it just couldn't work. It just couldn't work, and she shut up, like she had just been slapped down or something. And just the conversation kind of dried out, and so it was going through my head, everything that we'd been and seen and everything, and kind of thinking about it. And that town of McKinney is a very Victorian town,
Mm-hmm.
the older part of the residential section of it. So there were lots of really great homes around there that could be used for various and sundry reasons. And so about 3 or 4 exits down on the freeway going back down to Dallas, I spun off onto an exit, and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, it won't hurt to go back up and look at it in that light." And I was already convinced that I thought she was just tack on. It took me a day or two to actually tell her that. From the moment we went up there, that it was the place, and then we had to talk the guy into renting it to us for a few months, because we were going to need it lock, stock, and barrel, not just the few rooms that we used, because it was, we had to have a place for equipment and editing stuff and everything else. And so the concept was we would just use the house for everything, and that way we wouldn't have to go out and rent any place to put all the production offices and et cetera, et cetera. And so that became it. And then take note that the script had not been written yet, just the treatment still.
Yeah.
So what we were doing, without realizing it, was we were, taking the quality of the script down, building it up actually a lot, because by the time I sat down to start writing the script, we had every location picked. I had met the dog and knew the dog, and then I went and wrote the script because I could take time away. By that time, we had our own commercial production company, and I didn't feel like I could take time away until we knew that it was going to become, we were going to do it. We had money in our hands, etc. So it was great, and the entire crew was Dallas-based. There was nobody on the movie who had ever done a real movie before, except the trainers, Frank and his wife, and they had, of course, done movies, television, all sorts of stuff. But everybody else we'd all done our share of commercials, industrial films, things like that. But nobody had ever really worked on a real movie before. So we were all, including the art director, production designer.
And you also worked with two children in there, Cynthia Smith, and I can't pronounce the kid's last name, Alan Fusak. And they say working with children and animals is the most difficult thing to do in film, but I guess you did it very well here. What was it like, that process?
Well, it was just part of the process. To me, at that time, I was just I'm a jigsaw puzzle kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
I discovered the way you solve any problem is you get all the pieces out there on the table and start putting them together one at a time, and get that done, and then get the next piece, and not do 10 things at once. So it was just part of the thing that they were kids that had to work a certain way, and we just worked until we got it. But I wasn't afraid. We shot the opening shot of the movie 79 times.
Oh, very Kubrickian.
all the way, it was the first thing we ever shot, which is really stupid because, what you normally do on a movie is you take something that is either relatively easy or very easy for a day, so that everybody can get oiled and greased up in the job and working and getting everything done, and no big problems are going to come up, hit you in the face, and so that you get started on a good foot. I took the hardest shot in the entire movie, one, just because I thought it was symbolic to shoot the first shot the first day and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a sunrise kind of shot, an early morning shot when the dog is waking up and starting his round of the little town for the day.
Yep.
And it had to feel, and I wanted it desperately to, from the first moment that Benji's head pops through that window, I wanted him to grab the people in the audience and take them with him. And so it had to be real. It couldn't be a dog acting,
exactly,
being a trainer and that sort of thing. It had to be him, loose as a goose, getting out there, sniffing the early morning air, and yes, and yawning and going on out for the day.
Mm-hmm.
So everything worked perfectly. It's a dolly shot too, because it goes all the way across, diagonally across the front yard of the house, past the corner and around the corner, and starts zooming up to where that window is on the second floor.
Yeah.
And it's all one shot with, a million ways for it to go wrong. Dolly hit a bump, or the zoom wasn't on time, and it all had to hit that window at exactly the same time, because that was going to be the dog pops his head through, and the downbeat of the music starts, and off we go. And the very first time, the first series of shots that we did it, the very first shot we did, actually everything was perfect because the dog had been inside for 2 hours asleep in the crate.
Mm-hmm.
It was morning, nice fresh, morning, and when he popped his head through the window, it was as perfect as it could be. Boy, he did sniff the morning air, and Frank called a yawn out of him, and he gave that, and he flicked right on through the thing and jumped out of the window and went on, started his trek. And the one thing that was wrong that we didn't realize until we saw the dailies 2 days later is that the house faced east, and so it seemed logical to shoot it in the morning, and as the sun came over the horizon is when we started shooting, to have the very fresh early morning air.
Mm-hmm.
Except the sun is actually in the mornings just as orange as it is in the evenings when you get those beautiful sunsets.
Oh.
And the front of the house wasn't gray anymore, it was orange. It looked like a sunset. And I said, oh man. So we wound up, we decided the way to shoot it is to backlight it, shoot it at sunset actually, so that all the exposure, the brightness of the sun and everything would take out the orange, and the house being backlit would have a much bluer, nicer tone to it for early morning. And that was great, except Benji had been working all day in the hot Texas sun, and when he popped his head through the window, his tongue hanging out, it was just a mess. And so that we went through. I think we shot it every week that we were shooting. We would go back and shoot, and then recreate it. And the crew was really upset because it was a very hard shot to set up. Had to lay the dolly track and get the scaffolding up for Frank to be able to talk to the dog out, from a distance, not be in the shot. And it was complex, but I was just determined that we were going to get it as it should be, so that, as I was telling the crew morale just was slowly going away, going down, because they were driving back to Dallas every night. People were telling him that Camp doesn't have a clue what he's doing. That movie's never going to get finished. What are you doing up there with your time? And they were beginning to believe it, I think. And so I took him in. Took an hour away from shooting one day and took him in, and I said, good does not mean expert.
Mm-hmm.
And, the reshoots that we're having to do are, by and large, no one's fault but mine. But the important thing is not that we have to go in there and redo it. The important thing is, what is it going to do to an audience a year from now when we hope they'll be sitting in the theater soaking up this dog?
Yeah.
And everybody hit the ground all better, and we wound up getting it on take 79. And the thing that made it is we put the dog to bed after lunch.
Okay.
In the air conditioning, and went on and shot some stuff that we could do without the dog at all. And we had 2 scaffoldings up, one for Frank, one just out of sight to the right of the house and dog, just enough to where the shot could be made without getting that scaffolding in the shot. And we had a electric skillet, a pound of bacon, and a little electric fan. And just before we got ready to roll the camera, bacon was cooking, and we turned on the fan, and it wafted that smell right out in front of the window, and he popped through the window and immediately started sniffing the air. And I just did backflips. And the house looked great, everything looked great, and the stuff in the back, the arbor that he climbs, that was all built. I think the whole thing, the whole arbor was built. I don't even think there was a piece of it there, but it was built so that he could climb it, obviously.
Yeah.
But again, what I was trying to do in the beginning of this film, and all the way through it really, is give you many reasons to believe that what the dog winds up doing towards the end of the film is perfectly plausible.
Yeah.
Because this dog is one bright dog, and he's on his own, and he's got it. And so that was part of that, and the other part of that was the viewpoint that it gave him on people in the house.
Yeah.
Came in. There's some really nice, I mean, it was good for the dog, but it was also good for the viewer because it got some really nice angles in there.
Yep.
That sort of stuff. So that was two reasons that we did that. Harlan did a great job. I mean, it looked like it had been there as long as the house had. And whatnot. And it was just barely within Tiffany's reach.
Yeah.
And she had to struggle to get up when she started following him up the arbor. But yeah, it was. Think back.
Did the children? How did they react to doing the kidnap scene? Was that tense for them, or was that no big deal?
Yeah, it's no big deal.
Okay.
Neither of them had ever done this kind of work before, but it was work. They knew it was work, and they knew it was, there wasn't anything, super serious, real about it. And so they took it, acted right on through it. And they were great. I did not spend as much time with them, working through some of their stuff and so forth as perhaps maybe I should have, but I was spending all that time with Benji.
Yeah.
Because and here's the net of it was when we opened in Dallas at the best theater in town, just by luck, because we took the picture to Hollywood and screened it for every distributor out there, and every one of them categorically turned it down.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so we had to go back to Dallas with our tail between our legs, and either we had to throw it in the trash or figure it out. And so a guy at Universal had told me, he said, if I were you, if nobody cares about this film as much as you, I could take that film out and make it a hit. But I got to sit up here in the Black Tower, and I have no idea what my field crew out there all over the country is going to feel about it. And if they don't care about it as much as you do, this is going to be a really, really hard movie to sell. And if I were you, I'd go back trying to figure out how to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And boy, our chief investor, who was with me on that tour, run out to Hollywood, was just that totally sent him off to the side, because he's the guy who pulled in most of the investors and the money and so forth. And so we got a bunch of people who had never made a movie before, and they made one that was so bad that they can't get distribution. So now we want to spend more money and form a distribution company. There's the logic barrier there somewhere that is true, but that's ultimately what we wound up having to do, and so we did do, and pretty much handled that the same way that we did the movie. what I was saying is when we started the distribution, we played that one theater in Dallas. That was it. That's all we had in the beginning. And it happened to be the best theater in town, and we had it for 3 weeks going into the summer, like the last 2 weeks of May and the first week of June or something. And it did so well. I mean, it was what I would call a B minus. That the theater held it over for another week at the expense of Paramount, which happened to we were in the guy's office at Paramount trying to pitch the movie, and he was telling us to start what a terrible movie it was, how awful it was. Music was too sweet, too mushy. If you get that music out of there, maybe we could do something with it on matinees, but at prime time, never. And he was at Paramount, so I felt a little bit of justification when his picture got pushed away.
Yeah.
And it was because of Benji. But the point I was trying to get to, and Kathleen says I do wander. She warned you. But when we took it outside of Dallas, we had people from the newspaper and the TV and so forth out there several times on location, and they were keeping up with it as we were in editing. We did a screening. They got invited and all this kind of stuff. And so they were well prepped for what the concept of the movie was, that it was from the dog's point of view. The dog is the three-dimensional character. The people are the props. But the minute we got outside of Dallas, and offers started coming in immediately after the opening at North Park in Dallas, because the word just gets around. It's a pretty small industry, really, and so we were taking anywhere we could get a run that was as quality as that one that we had in Dallas, because we firmly believed that the picture had to have a lot going for it to make people turn their heads. An unknown dog, unknown movie, unknown director. Most of the people were B rated in Hollywood at best, and so the idea, we had to have good theaters that people say, oh, it must be good. It's playing at North Park. And so I stuck to that really hard, and it made enemies of a lot of people in our distribution organization that came up, because it was not going to veer off of that. But when we left Dallas, the reviews in Dallas were great. They're fantastic. And the minute we left Dallas, they flipped. And I don't think I still have them, but I remember reviews in the scrapbook that never even mentioned the dog.
Oh, wow.
They went in there with their little checklist, and this is for the most part, it's small town, in Texas. We were just rolling out as we could. When we could get the right theater in the right place, we would do it. And the reviewers were all coming in, with their checklist and saying, okay, how good are the actors? How good is the direction? And nothing about the dog.
Wow.
And literally, in one case, I know there's nothing. I mean, you kind of have to refer to the dog. I mean, and it's the classic reason of why we would not put a story synopsis in the press kit, because it's just mundane to the movie the way they were handling it. And so when it took me a week to get up off the floor, but when we finally realized what was going on, that the Dallas media was well prepped on the concept of the dog is the three-dimensional character in this movie. That's the one whose acting you need to be judging. And when we did, we started a tour, what wound up being a 120 city tour over 2 years, and it was in Houston. Then both papers in Houston at that time had New York people in their movie critic roles, people out of New York,
Mm-hmm.
and which scared me to death. And so we started to. We got Frank and Juanita and the dog and myself and one guy from our company, and we would hire PR firms in the town because they knew the market in the town. We talked to them, tell them what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it, and the two critics would not look at the movie if they had. I mean, would not do an interview if they hadn't seen the movie.
Okay.
And so I begged and pleaded, and I called one of them up on the phone and got him on the phone. I said, "Look, we're a little bitty company in Texas. We've got a fantastic movie, we believe, and we've got one print that we can spare, and it's going to wherever. And we just break the rule this one time, because we didn't want to be stuck in the same place that we were when we saw the reviews going in Waco and places like that. We wanted to have a shot at these people before they sat down to review the film."
Yep.
So they ultimately, both of them finally agreed, and we did a lunch in a really nifty restaurant in Houston, right in the middle of the restaurant, with the dog at the head of the table and Frank and I on either side, and the two of them next seat down, and then there were a couple of other press people, I think, print people there, and did this whole interview. And Frank, I don't know if you've seen any of the material on him, he's a great storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
And he did all the dogs on Petticoat, the dog on Petticoat Junction, which was Benji, but all the animals on Beverly Hillbillies, Petticoat Junction, Arnold the Pig, and all that stuff. And so his story goes all the way back to Asta in the Thin Man series. And so everybody wanted to talk to Frank, and we had a deal that, because the question would always come up, well, what Frank, is your best, what do you consider to be your best movie, or your hardest movie, or your most difficult situation? He'd always say, "Funny you should ask, because this movie is the toughest thing I've ever tried to do." And off he'd go, and he'd throw it to me whenever he ran out of juice. And so we got them well prepped into the fact that the dog is the three-dimensional character, the people are the props.
Yep.
And both the reviews came out of Houston excellent. One I would call A+, and the other one was at least an A. And the picture did very well down there.
Yeah.
So what we did is we toured, and I can't say we were doing it regionally, sort of we were, but we were going to wherever the bookings came in the right theaters that would help us get what we needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so we wound up doing the whole summer, changing, and what I felt coming out of Dallas is that we were getting a B- at North Park. It was good for unheard of, blah blah, but it was not lines around the block. And I was, had come out of advertising, and so I wasn't worried about marketing and all that kind of stuff. And come to find out that's God set all of that up for me to have a marketing and advertising background, because he knew the picture was going to be turned down in Hollywood. We were going to do it ourselves. And so I was supposed to be, pretty well founded in that. And the way I like to tell the story is that virtually every decision I made was wrong coming out of the gate. If it hadn't been for all the other pieces that were in the right place at the right time, it could have been a non-starter. But we were going after the wrong market. We thought it was going to be the older people. The rating system had just come in, a year or two before, and Hollywood was acting like kids in the candy store and throwing everything that they could get into a movie into it because they could just take a rating. And what the heck? And a lot of backlash was going on about that. What happened to the good old movies? And so we thought we could go to the older sector and bring them in, and because here's the kind of movie you've been complaining about not having. And we were dead wrong. They were already set to their, locked in front of their television set, and they weren't going to move or budge or come in. It wound up being young parents, white collar, mostly, always did better in the suburbs, in the urbans than it did out in the boondocks and so forth. So it was, and the tour had to happen. But by time we got all of our marketing together that first year,
Mm-hmm.
74, it was August, and we had an opening in Baltimore, which would tell us whether or not it was for sure, for real. We hit the long ball in Albuquerque,
Yep.
New Mexico. Everything came together, and we came within one picture of setting a house record in the best theater in town.
Yeah.
And so the next test was Baltimore, and that was August 14th, 15th, somewhere in there. And it was great. We were in 3 theaters and set records in 2 of them. And the summer was over. And so it was my concept. The investors were all saying, go, you finally got it together, go, we can do this in the fall. Well, back in those days, back when you were 2,
Yep.
it wasn't that simple. There's more of a blur between summer and fall right now than there was then. Right then, the minute kids were back in school, football was starting, the new television season was out, everything shifted until the holidays, till Thanksgiving to Christmas area.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to waste what we had, so I said, let's put it to bed. We'll go out and do a little testing in September.
Mm-hmm.
But let's put it to bed, do all of our homework, get everything lined up, and open next, late May of 1975. We will open Los Angeles in the November to Christmas period in order to qualify the song for an Academy Award.
Yeah, I feel loved by Charlie Rich.
Yes, and at that time, the song category, best song category, was kind of a forgotten. Nobody paid much attention to it.
Yeah.
They were just beginning, the Towering Inferno, and I think there was a James Bond out by then. They were just beginning to, stick songs in for that purpose, just to get a little extra added notoriety.
Mm-hmm.
And I told our composer when we were composing music, I want a song that can qualify for an Academy Award nomination. And I learned then, don't ever ask God for A if you really want B.
Yeah.
So I didn't ask for an award, I just asked for the nomination. And we did wind up getting the nomination. And we did win the Golden Globe.
Yeah.
The Towering Inferno won the Oscars.
Talk about bringing Charlie Rich into this.
Yeah, it was fascinating. I'm the guy who's saying we can do it. We can do anything. We can do our. I'm always out there that way, and this all can happen, and blah 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 blah. And at that moment in time, as we were coming up on the final edit, and which we had to go back and shoot an extra 10 minutes because when we did get the film pretty much edited, it was 10 minutes too short for
Mm-hmm.
the real movie. So we had to go back in December and shoot some more stuff. to get it, and it wound up being one of the best sequences in the film. But the Carolyn walked in one day, and Behind Closed Doors that was his first big hit, and it was really hot right in there. And somebody walked in. I think it was Carolyn. Said, "Why don't you ask Charlie Rich to sing that song?" We had the demo on, and I said, "Oh, give me a break! Come on, who's going to call Charlie Rich?" He said, well, "You call him." I said, "He doesn't know who I am from Adam's House Cat." No, that's silly. We can't afford it. Whatever it would cost, we can't afford it. Blah 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 blah. All the reasons in the world. And this chief investor guy that I was telling you about, when we got to talking about it, he said, "Hell, I'll call him." And I said, "Okay, go ahead." And so he gets his manager on the phone, and they talk it out, and he said, "Sure." And there was no payment. There was just a share of the publishing as the fee.
Oh, wow.
And I was just blown away and nervous as a cat when we went up to record it. We went up to Nashville to record it, and the music director was with us and everything. And then I started doing stupid things because the Ryman Simon. Have you ever heard that album, Paul Simon?
No.
I think it was his first one after they split up. Not sure. But he recorded it in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. There's a great rhythm section down there that has gotten very famous and has been used a lot. There's a documentary out on it, in fact, about these guys. And it all kind of started. I mean, they were there, but it all started with that Ryman Simon album because it's really, really good and really rhythmical and everything. And I said, Yule, Yule Box was our music guy. And I said, why don't you go to Muscle Shoals to record the track for this? Really get some good stuff going on. And he did, and it didn't, it was okay. But it wasn't anything spectacular like that album was. But then we took all that up to Nashville and recorded my first recording session, and I was just aghast at how the producer basically kowtowed to the, he's sitting in the room, and he'd never say, you went off key on, you went out of pitch into such and such word, let's punch in and do that piece again. He goes, that's really great, let's just try it one more time, see what we get. And it was that way kind of all the way through it, and I'm sitting back there just in a maze, just why didn't you, if it was me in there, I'd want to know what the problem was so I could focus on it. And but his whole philosophy was the other side of the fence. And, we ultimately got it really well, and it was great. And he had Benji come out. His first Vegas thing, I think it was at the Las Vegas Hilton, was later that year after the movie had been out, and he asked, he was going to do I Feel Love on his show out there, but he asked if Benji could come out for opening night. So a whole slew of us went out there to Vegas, and he had Benji come out on the stage with him and whatnot while he was singing that song, and it was just like surreal.
Oh, wow.
A year ago or 2 years ago, we were in a little townhouse in Plano, Texas, writing at the kitchen table, and all the stuff that happened during that period was.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you about a few of the actors. I mean, you had Deborah Walley, who, of course, was known for the one of the Gidget movies, and you had Garrett come in there, Patsy Garrett in there for comic relief. Any memories of them?
Yeah, sure. I talked to. I haven't talked to her in a long time, but I've talked to Patsy Garrett all the time, used to, once a year or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Chris Connolly is dead,
Yeah.
and I haven't kept up with Mark Slade, but Tom Lester, who played the tall scaredy cat guy
Yep.
in the film from Green Acres,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a fraternity brother of mine from Ole Miss.
Okay.
And when he showed up on Green Acres at a time when we were just beginning, myself and the other two guys were just beginning to decide, let's try to write for television comedy. And nobody in the fraternity had any clue that he had any ambitions in that direction. And he had been in med school and wound up ending up in pharmacy because he couldn't pass his way through med or pre-med, and wound up teaching in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, he's a lay preacher and very, very Christian, and he absorbed all kinds of, stuff, crud, doing during his college term, because the guys on the other end of the spectrum, somebody brought him in one day and said, "Tiger, you got to come in here." That was his nickname. You got to come in here. We got God in a box, and we don't know what to do with him. And he just, oh. But what a great guy he was, and we contacted him after we saw him on Green Acres and said what we were trying to do, and he said, "Knock it in and come out here. I'll introduce you to Paul Henning." And I didn't know Paul Henning from Adam's House Cat at that time. Just happened to be probably the most successful situation comedy producer in the city at that
Mm-hmm.
moment. He had 3 shows going on, and sweet a guys you could ever. And the reason I discovered right then, the reason why nobody does these things, you can't just pick up the phone and call somebody and say, "Hey, would you spend 30 minutes with me?" Because they all know if there's any merit to the conversation, it's going to. And I have learned over time just much the same way. So they just shield themselves from that kind of thing. But he liked Tom so much that he said, "Sure." And he was going to give us 30 minutes, and we wound up talking for 4 hours one day. All of us sitting on his couch in there while he had a script he had to finish before they could start shooting on it for the next week. So he was very sweet, and we stayed in contact until he passed away.
What about Deborah Wiley?
And Deborah Wiley, I haven't talked to since.
Okay.
But she has told somebody that I talked to recently that at some point she said that was one of her favorite roles.
Okay.
The Benji movie, and we got along fine. We she was great, and both of our fears, hers and mine, was the scene that she had to do at the end.
Okay.
Where she really breaks down.
Mm-hmm.
And could she bring it off? She did a great job.
Yep.
And she was good, and Tiger's still alive and well in Laurel, Mississippi.
It's interesting because, Benji was a massive hit. And then it led to, of course, you brought most of the cast back for the love of Benji. Talk about that process.
Well, there were 3 of them. We did not bring the dad back.
No.
And there were reasons.
Okay.
He you didn't ask about him, but.
Oh no, I did. Nope. Sorry, I neglected that. What was the story there? Do you mind mentioning?
Well, he promised. At that time, he was fairly hot on I don't know, Big Valley or one of those Dallas-like shows or something.
Okay.
And we thought that it would give us some help, marquee-wise, and he got a gig to do a dinner theater show in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
I've forgotten what the show was now. While he was doing the movie, so he was commuting back and forth on I don't know, wherever it is, 3 days a week or whatever, to do that show down there, and then getting in the car after the show, driving back up to Dallas and having to be on set at 8 o'clock in the morning or something, of which he was almost always late. And one time he fell asleep at the wheel and crashed into a tree, had to go to the hospital. Nothing serious, thankfully, and he was just kind of, I don't know.
Yeah.
Pain. He was, you know, pretty sold on himself. And, you know, Chris Conley and Mark Slade were both very good guys. Deborah Wally was.
Yeah.
And of course, Tiger was an old buddy. But, and you know, Uncle Joe, you know, Edgar Buchanan was great.
Yeah.
And Terry Carter was great. He's the cop. But I didn't find him as that good an actor, number one.
No.
And he was such a, he caused us so much scheduling problems during the course of it all that he just left a really bad taste in my mouth. And I was glad to see
Well, you brought back Patsy Garrett and the two kids.
yeah.
And
Two.
yeah.
And so there were three from the original cast that went over there. And at that time, I had not evolved to a point. I felt like there had to be some sort of a sequelization feel to it. And we evolved ultimately into Benji is a personality
Yep.
who can do any kind of film, like Oh Heavenly Dog. Or
Yeah, we're going to get that Heavenly Dog here in a minute, but this one here, they go on a trip. Now, what made you decide on this idea for the sequel, For the Love of Benji?
Well, I was trying to, I went into it with the, one of the many reasons that it did work so well, the first one is because Benji was doing all of this for someone else.
Okay.
And before I realized what kind of a difference it could make, you know, I immediately was saying to myself, I don't want to do that same story again.
Absolutely. Good thinking. Good thinking.
But in the process of it, what we did was slide so far the other way, where Benji is doing all of Benji's stuff for himself.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was under attack.
Yeah.
The whole movie. And I felt like that the first one was always, the second one did well.
Mm-hmm.
Almost half as much as the first one,
Mm-hmm.
or a little more than half, I guess. But I did not. I always felt like it was the difference in the emotional uptake on the movies. The first one, he was doing all of this for somebody else, and that brings in the heart and soul more from the audience. Whereas he's doing all of it in the second one, you know, out of fear for himself, and that's not quite as emotional. But it, over time, and that's the way I felt about it when it was all finally said and done. I felt like it's not the same movie from a audience suck-in sort of position. It didn't have the same emotional edges that the other one did, which of course it did. It kind of started that way. But the reason that we were where we were with it is because I wanted every advantage I could get, you know, in terms of, you know, look, graphic feel of the film, the what can we do with an audience that will help them identify with Benji, and that's put them into a place where they can't read the alphabet, much less speak the language.
Yeah.
And you know, we tried Paris, and it was just too sweet. You know, too nice.
Yeah.
And looked at Rome. It had the language barrier, but you could still read it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've ever had any Spanish at all, you know, you can kind of get by with signs and things like that, knowing what they say, what they're saying. But it's kind of. But when we landed in the airport in Greece,
Yeah.
in Athens, there were soldiers, you know, with machine guns out on the tarmac, and you know, we were most definitely in a place that made me nervous.
Yeah.
And so the next stop was supposed to be Istanbul or somewhere over there, and I called it off. We got to Athens. I think we found something that's photographic, photogenic. Everywhere you look, the language is perfect. You know, it does what it's supposed to do for that.
Yeah.
And so let's go on and get the script written,
Mm-hmm.
move along. And so we did the rest of the tour. And it worked that way. You know, it was kind of a pain because the Greeks still have enough of that romantic tendency of those countries over there. You know, they go to lunch about 2 and then go to take a nap and then come back and work until 10. The night doesn't get started until 11 or 12.
Yeah.
You know, and they're throwing plates all night while you're trying to get to sleep.
Yeah.
And then the garbage down. We did a lot of shooting down in what they call the Plaka. If you don't know Athens, it's the old town of Athens, and it's where a lot of the tavernas and things are. And you know, we're shooting sound on occasion, and the garbage trucks are all there, just crunching plates all morning
Yeah.
long because that's all swept up all the plates, put them in the garbage dump, and the truck comes along, and it really screw up a track. But it's and the people were, you know, they kind of had that spirit of now wait, you said you would have this. We have to have this to shoot this morning. Well, we tried. I know, but you said last night that you would have it. Well, we tried.
Oh, gee.
And we had a very mixed crew, which was kind of fun in retrospect. You had an Irish gaffer,
Mm-hmm.
a British focus puller, several Greeks on the crew, and others that mixed in. So it was really a fun group to work with. And the Greek production, we had a Greek production manager and one that we brought with us from the States. And the one that we brought with us from the States had the seniority. I mean, he was the head production manager. But this other lady was the Greek production manager, and she had most of the crew under her wing. So anytime there was any kind of little dispute of any kind, you know, she would threaten to take her crew and go home.
Yeah.
And there were not any keys in the Greek crew, but they all had to be there. You know, you had to have the whole crew to be able to work. And so there were some bad memories of all of that, but mostly it was a good experience. What I really love about that picture is that over time I've grown to like it a lot more than I did right after it was done.
Okay.
And it's credit to For the Love of Benji that it went out day and date against Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
And Benji, of course, it was Jaws. But the nice thing about the way we did Benji, which was not our choice, we just did what we could as we could, as we could get it. We wound up playing the entire country that summer of '75, but it was haphazard. You know, we replayed Los Angeles from the previous fall, and but New York was the last one we opened.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't get the run that we wanted up there. and we finally opened at 3 theaters in New York, and set house records in one of them and did fantastic, and we're in the black, spending a lot of money in, I don't know, like 6 weeks. And we immediately then got the run we wanted for the first run.
Okay.
Because it had done so well in the other theaters. But that's kind of the way we played the whole country. You know, it's very, a lot of people would look at it very piecemeally, but the nice thing about it, and I probably didn't realize this at the time, but we were because we were really carefully monitoring everything. So every opening we had, almost without exception, was huge. And we had our stuff together on the marketing side of it, and had proved it, and it was excuse me, it was working, and so we had good projections on what we were going to make out of it. We were leveraging that money forward for as the markets got more expensive, and got into Boston and Philadelphia and that area and so forth. But we wound up playing the entire summer somewhere. And every week we'd go out with a trade release about, Benji sets records in Atlanta or Boston or Philadelphia or wherever it happened to be. And with the grosses, the per screen average, because we couldn't go up against something like Jaws or anything on a total gross.
No.
Because we had 600 prints working and they had about 3,000.
Yeah.
But we could go up with anybody on a per screen average, and so we were constantly in the trade press, and of course, who reads the trade press? All the media in all the markets.
Yeah.
Stays up with Variety or Hollywood Reporter or both or whatever. And so it was over. It didn't come and go away. It was going on every week. They were seeing stuff about this. And if, the guy in Detroit is saying, wow, when are we getting this movie? Why don't we, blah, 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 blah. And it was stirring that kind of stuff up. And I've never forgotten in the Detroit Free Press, there was a graphic, one of these big, looked like a political cartoon thing. I don't remember what section it was in right now, but it was right at the top of the page, probably 12 by 12 or something like that, with the you remember the art from Jaws?
Yeah.
The girl swimming along and the shark coming up.
Yeah.
This was a shark swimming along and a dog coming up. And that was the feeling around the country. It wasn't in the final box office gross. It wasn't even close. But the momentum. I remember the front page headline in Weekly Variety in New York was Jaws, Benji, Boffo, and Gotham.
Yeah.
And so there was method in the madness. It all really worked together to make the thing.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say the two kids never went on to do any more acting after that. You had them for those first 2 movies.
Right. And
yeah.
To my knowledge, neither one of them did. I don't know if Alan did or not. I have not been in touch. I have been in touch with Cindy.
How's she doing?
Over the years, and she was a mom with 2 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Last time I talked to her or saw her or ran into her when we left Dallas, it kind of didn't close the doors. It just wasn't front and center anymore.
Well, I'm going to tell you, and I don't get this, but my favorite Benji film was always Oh Heavenly Dog, and I watched it yesterday just before this interview because it didn't do well, and it got slammed by critics. But I think you see some of Benji's smartest work in the film.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I don't disagree with. I don't. It's not one of my favorite. We watched it again within the last 6 months, and it was okay, but we kind of had done a Benji Film Festival coming up because of the original Benji and For the Love of Benji have been remastered in widescreen, full HD, Blu-ray, and the whole thing, and are both on Netflix and in DVD form, in that form. And of course, Benji Off the Leash was shot in HD, so that one is. And so we were just going back through all of them. And with Brandon, the latest one was done by my son, and then written and directed by him, and did just a super job. Have you seen that one?
Not yet, no.
You should look at that because he just did a great job.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I keep trying to figure it out because the dog, I didn't feel was asked to do enough, and it was kind of a trainer thing maybe.
Yeah.
But Brandon did so much more with the people than I did.
Okay.
And the kids are just great, just absolutely sensational. There's a little girl in there called, her name is Darby Camp.
Okay.
And she's been in several things since then, on in a series, a fairly major series on Netflix, I think. And she's going to be she's going to go far, I think. Anyway, the Oh Heavenly Dog, we allowed more space, I guess, for Benji in that picture because it wasn't Benji, as a Benji film. And so we let him go beyond, since theoretically Chevy Chase was supposed to be inside of him.
What was the story behind doing something different with this one?
It was the same thing I mentioned earlier. I had it in my crawl I had it in my head that to really get longevity out of this character, you couldn't just be doing the same thing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started positioning Benji as an actor, in effect, as a personality.
Okay.
And not as a result of the story. That's, you notice that after For the Love of Benji, we immediately left the original cast and everything and went elsewhere.
Yeah.
Did Benji the Hunted, which is one of my favorites. And Benji Off the Leash is great. It didn't do very well, but it's one of my favorite movies.
You had a character named Higgins in this, and I was wondering if that character was named after the original dog.
I can't answer. I don't think so.
No?
I don't think so. I don't think that crossed our minds when we were writing it. I wrote it with somebody else, and but I can't swear to it, but I have no recollect that it was.
Well, I was watching it yesterday, and I gotta say, I'm gonna tell you the things I loved about this movie. And number one, I love that shot of the Big Ben and the rain coming down, and the music starts, and you pull away from it, and you pull away from it, and you see all these black umbrellas, and then you get this red umbrella with Chevy Chase in it. And of course, we've all had a cold, of course, underneath this rainfall. We can all relate to trying to get all the as many Kleenexes together just to nurse a cold, and he can't get a cab, can't get anything. And I just love that shot where you could just see this one lone red umbrella amongst all these black ones. But
I'm tickled. I am really tickled because that's the way we meant all of it to read, and to draw the audience in. This poor guy, and etc.
Yep.
I always felt that a lot of that part of the film was that aspect of it was being ignored.
Not by me. I'll tell you some other things I liked in this movie too. Is the way you used art in this movie, like when Chevy chases in Benji and he goes in I think it was Carlton Court. You could tell I watched this movie a lot, and you got I love the shots, the ominous music going along with the shots of the arts and the figurines and the mask and whatnot, and that was beautiful. And that whole section in the Needham Art Gallery, and the music and the horns, and you got all this interesting art and Benji reacting, like this looks pathetic or something like that. And I loved all of that. All the locations in this movie drew me in, and I don't know if you're praised enough for this, but I gotta say, bravo for focusing on stuff like that, because combined with the music, because if you watch when they go into the murder site and the ominous music that goes along with all those weird masks and stuff like that and art pieces, and I love that. I've watched Oh Heavenly Dog several times just to feel that out, and I think that's something I don't think you've ever been really addressed to full appreciation for.
Well, that's very kind of you. That's very, very nice. You were reading it exactly the way what we wanted to come out of it when we were shooting it, and we had a lot of help with the production designer, art director, and whatnot on that. There's some weird stuff in there that I would have probably never thought of.
Talk about the art itself. Like, how did you select for your shots of all just stuff that stood out to you? And
well, they're all. It all has to do with the character.
Mm-hmm.
And the dead character was connected, to the art gallery or somebody at the art gallery or something. I've forgotten what. So she had to be a little weird in her taste.
Yeah.
And the art gallery itself had to be weird because the characters that were involved in it from that standpoint were pretty much weird. And so it just kind of evolved out of the characters that were involved in the thing more than anything else. And to the best of my knowledge is why we went some of the ways that we did.
Yeah, I remember some of those art pieces, like the red lining thing going around the figure, and Benji reacting to that white fluffy thing with the beating heart. Yeah, I love the feel of that. Needham Art Gallery, was that actual location, or was that a set?
It was a set.
Oh, was it a set? Yeah. What about Carlton Court there?
The house,
where the murder was. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a set as well.
Oh wow, beautifully done.
That whole movie most of it was shot in Montreal.
Yeah, I read that too, especially the stuff with the dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing that was shot elsewhere is the closing scene.
Mm-hmm.
Was actually shot in Paris, not London. And the reason is that, in my opinion,
mm-hmm.
the Thames never looked as good as the Seine looks. And so we just got a double-decker bus to go across the bridge while we were shooting down there right across from Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But that and the stuff that you're talking about, there was some stuff with God, what's her name?
Oh, Jane Seymour. Yeah.
Yeah, there was some stuff with Jane Seymour out in the down south of London, in, rabbit country and whatnot. It was shot helicopter work and,
mm-hmm.
and whatnot, and then the stuff that's obviously normal. Everything that was shot almost everything that was shot in London has something in it, like
Yeah.
Ben or something that pretty much identifies it.
And you had some great stuff out of Benji, like dialing the phone and stuff. Talk about that.
Well, he's that kind of stuff he does very quickly and simply.
Yeah?
He understands that stuff. I just won't let him do it in a real Benji movie because it's over the top. It's not something that a dog would say, "Oh, I see what they're doing. They're dialing a phone, and I can do that."
But of course, Chevy Chase is inside him, so he has to solve this murder. Yeah.
Of him, so it's all okay. I like the scene where Benji goes into the PM, not
Post office?
the minister's office.
Oh, the minister's office. Okay.
And he's trying to find a clue of any kind anywhere or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he winds up seeing something on the calendar, but he's down on the floor level, and he opens a drawer, and then pushes it shut, and it kind of goes and stops like drawers like that will. Then he does something else and jumps up in the chair and puts his 2 feet on the desk and starts looking around on it. There's just something that all is very natural about that. I mean,
Yeah.
Benji was doing a really good job, and he had been prepped for the post office scene where he gets the
Oh, that was great.
letter out of the backside of the post office just as Omar Sharif is reaching for the front side of it. And I remember I was just looking at, for some other reason, it was, I guess, Benji at Work, the series,
Yeah.
the special that we did, has that mailbox set up in Frank's backyard,
Oh.
where he was working on it and practicing and getting him used to doing that, because that kind of stuff, prepping on that kind of stuff is really good because it saves you enormous amounts of time on the set.
Yeah.
When the dog says, "Oh yeah, I've done this before," okay. And there's things in there that I like a lot and appreciate your take on it.
Yeah.
Talk to a lot of people who appreciate it as much as you do. So
I really like it. In fact, it's my favorite of the Benji movies, and a lot of it has to do with the locations, and a lot of it has to do with how you employ the music and the artwork. There's a lot of ominous, like the art is taken on just this ominous form through the music, like when he's investigating as the dog, investigating the murders, and you see all those faces, and I think that really added to it. And I've always liked Chevy Chase. What was it like working with him?
actually, that was my biggest fear and my best discovery.
Oh, okay.
Because he was absolutely fine. I think that, I was also worried about the drug aspect of it because he was pretty well known at that point in time.
Yeah.
But to my knowledge, there may have been one time when he slipped off to a restaurant somewhere that he might have sniffed a little or something. But
Yeah.
he was tack on. He was on doing his thing as he's supposed to do. And he didn't have all that much to do on camera.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he only worked about a week. And in the rain scene with Jane Seymour,
Yeah.
and she was just complaining and bitching and just because it was all rain machines,
Mm-hmm.
but they had to be right in the middle of it the whole time for rehearsals and for shooting, and just getting soaked, and it wasn't summer.
No.
and Chevy stepped up to her at one point and said, "Look, this is why you get the big bucks. Man up." And I was just, wow. Surprised and pleased.
Yeah, no, I like Chevy Chase's work in this film too. Like, we've all had a cold, and we've all been out in that kind of rain. I can feel it every time I watch that. So when he's trying to get indoors, and until he's sitting in a chair with a thermometer and one light a cigar. So
And
Jane's,
a boost in the cough medicine.
yeah, there you go.
But tell him that sometime. Find him and tell him that, because he has made jokes on various talk shows and things about that being the worst experience he ever had. He should never have done it. Blah blah blah.
Well, he did 3 movies that year, and of course Caddyshack being the biggest. But I gotta say, I liked Oh Heavenly Dog. I found it fascinating, and I really liked his work in it. I wouldn't say it's his greatest performance, but I think for what he did, I think it was effective, and threw a few one-liners in there. And Jane Seymour looked lovely in it. You say she wasn't easy to work with?
Not. I mean, she was a little of a pain, like Chevy was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, she was fine. She was, she took me into her room one time and opened up, because I kept telling her, because everything I had seen her in up until that point had been a character part.
Yeah.
She played one of the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders in that movie or some movie, completely without accent, and American girl gone nuts on football. And I don't know, but there were 2 or 3 other things, and they were all either period or character kind of roles. And I said, I just want you to be you.
And she was playing, of course, an author who writes about this murder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said, I just want you to be you. And she drug me into her room and opened up this big double closet. And all this wardrobe was sitting there. She said, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I said. I don't remember. I was just kind of aghast that other actors, like the ton of them, they're always them. They're always themselves.
Yep.
No matter what role they're playing, they're playing it as themselves. Gene Hackman is one of those.
Yeah.
But she didn't know who she was.
Yeah. You had a lot of great casting in this movie too. I like the fact that she played a smart character. Of course, you had some stuff in there that probably bothered the MPAA or family audience, like Benji jumping into the tub when she's in there. Of course, that's off camera, and some of the language here and there. Did you guys come under heavy fire for that?
Didn't come under heavy fire because I think one reason is it just didn't draw enough attention.
Okay.
But that was all kind of, as I said, if you take out some of that language
Mm-hmm.
and maybe try to do something with the knife, you could have probably gotten a Benji qualified rating out of it. As it was, I think it was just PG. It wasn't R.
No, and you don't really see any blood with the knife. You can tell it's a push-in knife, but maybe they should have just had the knife come down and not show the connect. I don't know. Yeah.
But the bottom line was that they didn't want any part of that. So I tried to sell Fox on cleaning up the track a little bit and making it where it could be one of Benji's movies, because people always ask, well, how many Benji movies have they been? I said, well, there have been 5 real Benji movies, and then there's Oh Heavenly Dog.
I wish they'd hurry up and put it on Blu-ray. I want to see that on Blu-ray.
I don't think it's ever going to happen. I don't think Fox has even a smallest care that it's not on Blu-ray.
I don't get that, because you got Benji, you got Chevy Chase, you got Jane Seymour, you got Omar Sharif. You guys a great ensemble cast in this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Omar Sharif, watching him react to this dog. I mean, that's the best performance in the movie, is Omar Sharif.
I loved him too. My wife didn't like him very much.
No.
Because It's a womanizer.
Oh.
Question about it. But we would sit, you know, most actors,
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but most actors I've found that I've had experience with are about paper thin.
Okay.
You know, you talk for 10 minutes, you know, about stuff that doesn't relate to the movie or acting or this kind of stuff, and, you know, it just dries up. And Omar Sharif is a great person to talk to because he stays up with world events. And, you know, he travels with the bridge tournaments around the world, and he's just really an interesting fan. And we get into great arguments about stuff, and not ugly arguments, just, you know, really strong debates. We sit there for hours at dinner and go on. So I enjoyed him a lot, and one of the most memorable times I've had coming out of the moviness or the movie business is sitting next to him in our daily theater in I guess we were in Montreal.
Yeah.
And after dailies, we screened Dr. Zhivago.
Okay.
And I got to watch that movie sitting next to him.
Oh, wow.
And he was just grinning like a Cheshire cat all the way through.
I bet.
And he tells the story that he was going absolutely crazy because Lean wouldn't let actors go into the dailies. And so he'd be standing outside the daily rooms wanting to hear people talking, and they'd come out and say, "Wasn't Julie Christie great? Wasn't so yeah." And nobody was ever mentioning him, and he was about to have a nervous breakdown, he said. And so he calls David Lean one night about 11 or 12 o'clock, wakes him up, and tells him that he's going nuts. He needs to talk to him. And so he goes over and talks to him. And the nut of the conversation was that David Lean told him to trust him. He said, "I don't care what they're talking about coming out of dailies. When they leave the theater, there's one person they're going to have in their head and on their mind. And that's you.
Yep.
You are a poet. You're an observer. You're always there.
Yep.
You may only have 12 lines or whatever it is in the entire movie, but you're always there." And it's true. I mean, Dr. Zhivago is Omar Sharif, and I have trouble remembering when you get past Julie Christie who else is in it. You know, and it's anyway. I thought it was fascinating, and he told us that story before we had this screening, so I was able to kind of track it through and see how true it really was. That, you know, he's always there, he's always involved, but he doesn't have the winning performance of that particular scene or this particular scene or this particular scene as such.
Yeah. Well,
a good head on David Lean to know what to do and to see all that.
Well, watching him react to Benji, I thought was some of the best stuff in the movie. Even in the post office, like when he's yelling, he reaches through, like, you know, and he was a great villain in the movie. But even like when he's looking through the door and he sees the dog dialing the phone, like he makes it very real in his reaction. Some actors would overact that, but he does. He's a pro.
Yeah, he did it. I thought he did a great job.
Yeah.
All the way through it, and he was, like I say, he was a good guy too. I enjoyed knowing him, and his son was actually there. Who's Sharif, and he was a production assistant.
You had some really good. You had Robert Morley in that as Jane Seymour's publisher, Stuart Germain playing, of course, Higgins, Chevy's contact in heaven, and have that little lightsaber thing. We had this before Star Wars. Of course, you see him again in the post office. Stamps with animals? Yes, we do. And Alan Sue's there as the cab driver. He was really funny. Good voice for the cat. Talk about working with him.
He was great. He was great. He is what you see him. He's just funny. He's fun. He's good to be around. And I don't think he takes any of it too seriously.
And Barbara Lee Hunt, of course, who worked with Hitchcock and Frenzy. Had her in there.
Who?
Barbara Lee Hunt played Chevy Chase's secretary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she was in Frenzy.
Yeah, she was great.
Yeah, like a great ensemble cast. I gotta say, I'm sorry this film got so many bad reviews or stuff in it. Like, I mean, maybe it might have been a little too adult for the target audience. But you know something? I got a lot of appreciation for this movie, you know, and like I said, I love the locations. You get the great Elton John tune throughout it, and you know, you had a great ensemble cast. I'm sorry it didn't work out, but I hope it. I think it will get a Blu-ray. I mean, you get too much of a good thing going for it not. It's got to eventually.
You know, you ought to send a note to Fox.
Yeah.
I know thousands of people who want the Blu-ray on this.
Yeah, you should do a commentary track on it.
Say what?
You should do a commentary track on the Blu-ray when it comes out.
Well, if they want to do it, I'm happy to do that.
Oh yeah, no, I enjoy this movie.
There's one on the. Brandon and I did one on the original Benji and the For the Love of Benji remasters.
Okay.
That was fun, and I was paranoid. I know. I said, how much time you got allotted for this? I don't know, 5 hours or something. I said, oh no, never. You know, I'll never get through. We'll be doing this, you know, all the way to midnight or whatever. And we did both of them in one take without any pickups. It was just amazing.
Well, I love Oh Heavenly Dog. I thank you for making it, and I like the movie a lot. So that is my favorite Benji movie, and I think I've just wowed you with some of the reasons why. You probably don't get that a lot, but you get it from me.
I appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't get to hear that a lot from there, and hasn't been a career of thousands like so many people out there. They make 3 a year and just keep on trucking. But you know, I like to think all of the ones that we've done, you know, wound up with merit. I certainly think that one did. It was just very discouraging, and it happened at a time when, you know, Fox was changing hands.
Yep.
The Alan Ladd's group is the one who made the deal,
Mm-hmm.
and then they packed up and left, and the board or whoever went over to I think it's Columbia somewhere, and just brought the whole team from this other studio over to Fox,
Mm-hmm.
and it's from a studio that had already turned the movie down,
Ah.
and so it didn't.
Well, next time you watch the movie, watch it through from my perspective. I think you'll find the view even more enticing.
Okay.
Yeah, I love the movie, so I appreciate you making it. And then you went from that to Benji the Hunted.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
That if you think working with 12 actors can be a pain, try working with 12 trainers. That is, and it literally, we had, you know, a bear and a wolf and Benji all on the set at the same time in a single shot. And you know, how can I get my bear to do this when you're yelling at your dog to do that? Oh, it was every movie that we've made has been approximately 12 weeks of shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow Brandon did his in maybe 7. I don't have a clue. How he did that. But that may be some of the because that was the budget that he had. He had to do it. He didn't do it independently. He did it with Blumhouse out in California.
Okay.
And they had, and he had to. I mean, it wasn't a Hollywood film in the traditional sense in terms of size of crew, but it's probably as many as we've ever had, except perhaps on Oh Heavenly Dog. We wound up with over 100 on Oh Heavenly Dog.
Well, Heavenly Dog was a bigger budget than most of your movies, huh?
It was 7.
Yeah.
They their deal was ultimately we had a tax shelter in Germany going on with that movie, and we were already had locations in London set and yada da and yada da, and I think we were going to shoot some of the stage stuff in Germany because of the tax shelter or something. But anyway, virtually at the paper signing for that, we're over there in wherever we were, Berlin, I think. And they said, and we got to sign 2 of these.
Yeah.
I said, what's that? Well, you know, the real accounting is in this one, and the accounting for people to see is in that one, or something. What they wanted is that they wanted me to sign off on not telling the truth with how money was spent. And so I walked away and I had our New York attorney with us at the time. It was a dear friend. And I said, who do you know in Hollywood? Well, I know some people at Fox. I said, well, get on a plane and go there instead of home. And I'll go home and wait for your call. And we already had Chevy Chase booked, who was supposed to be Burt Reynolds.
Okay.
And that is totally very funny side story that angered me. I think Chevy Chase wound up doing it better than Burt Reynolds would have.
Okay.
But we were in Cannes promoting that movie. And Sally Field was there.
Okay.
For something that she had done that she was getting an award for or something. And so, and we'd spent the big bucks and had a London PR outfit, the name of which escapes me right now, but they were with us all the time. And so she, the lady that was with us, found out where Sally Field was going to be on any given day. And we'd been trying to get a script for Burt Reynolds, but we couldn't get it to him.
Okay.
You know, we'd send it to the agent wouldn't send it to him, and blah, blah, blah. And so got Frank and Benji. We went down to this, like a ballroom. It was a big room, but there was a chair out, 2 chairs out in the middle of it for her and for whoever was doing this interview with
Okay.
her. And we crack open the door, and yep, there they are. And so we have a script for Oh Heavenly Dog with a note, paperclip to it. They said, we've been trying desperately to get this to Burt. Would you hand it to him, please? And gave the script to Benji, put it in his mouth, and sent him to Sally Field. And without a lot of to-do, I mean, go on over, take it, and handed it to her. And she just laughed. And Benji was pretty well known around Cannes at that point because we were doing all kind of stuff and making a big deal out of being there and everything. And so she knew that he was there. And so and she waved at the window and says, I will do exactly that. So we waited and called an agent, or whatever. He's got the script, and I think it's one of these situations where the agent says, not on your life are you going to do this movie. But so we go on, make the deal. I fly out, have a conversation with Chevy Chase. That went well. I think his agent was there. I'm not sure, and so we went ahead and made the deal verbally, and for him to do it. And then while the papers were being drawn up, my secretary said, Joe, Burt Reynolds is on too. I said, oh, give me a break, because she knew that we'd been going through all this mess and everything and could never get a hold of him. I said, no, it's him. Pick up the phone, and it is. And he's saying, I just read that script. I think it's hysterical, and I'd love to do it.
Okay.
Oh, man. I said, what? What's the matter? He said, well, we never heard anything, and we tried to get in through your agent, and he said that you didn't like it or whatever he said. And, yeah, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. So we'd love for you to do it, but we've already closed the deal. And it was not on paper yet, but I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to go back and say, well, it wasn't on paper, so we made another deal.
Yeah.
And Chevy Chase was pretty hot right in there, too,
Mm-hmm.
that period. So I figured it was pretty much 6-1.
Do you regret not getting Burt, or are you happy that with Chevy?
I don't know, because I don't know what he'd have brought to it. You know, he was his fame or whatever was, you know, based more on, he was kind of a love idol. You know, he
Mm-hmm.
Chevy Chase was a comedian,
Mm-hmm.
and so I don't know if that would have changed the dynamic any or what, but you know, and he was basically good in his bad movies that he did.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I have no way of knowing any of that. It is what it is.
What
God opens this door and shuts that one, and I say,
What went wrong with it at the box office? Was it marketing, or was it up against something that really bankrolled on it? What happened?
I don't think they could get a handle on, I don't think they cared to start with, the studio, because of the situation I mentioned earlier. And so I don't think they put a lot of thought into, or a lot of work into the marketing and or the distribution, you know, in terms of what theaters they were at and where the screens were and all of that. And it, they just, you know, nothing gelled, and I think that I think it began at the top, that they didn't want it. It was, they're not going to be judged on it, because they're going to only be judged on the product that they bring through.
Oh, wow.
And so all the stuff that Alan Ladd left for them, you know, they could care less about. And at least ours was one of those. And so that's the... But I also think that, you know, in all honesty, that we thought that if we put one and one together, we'd get a 3 or a 4 by mixing Chevy's audience and Benji's audience.
Yeah.
Benji's audience doesn't go to see Chevy stuff, and Chevy stuff, people don't go see Benji.
And you get a nice caper background to the story, too. So.
And,
yeah.
you know, what happened was that we just scared both of them to death. That's, I think that played into it. That, you know, not a chance you're going to go see that foul-mouthed, drunk, dope, you know, sniffing Chevy Chase.
Oh, wow.
To the kids. And on the other side, they say, what is he, a sellout? What are you doing? I'm not going to see a dang Benji movie.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. But I think that probably played into it some, too. We thought it would be a 1 + 1 = 3, and it wound up being a 1 - 1 = 0.
Well, it brought me a lot of joy. I really enjoyed the movie a lot. So, you know.
I will put a little thing on the shelf.
Well, I appreciate that. I know you gotta go feed your horses here soon, but I did want to ask you about 2 of your other pictures here briefly. One is Humps, which I actually haven't seen, but you get to work with Slim Pickens in that.
Yeah, that was a great cast. That was fun.
Jackie Lamb.
Yeah, that was a fun cast, and they were all old heads, and you know, had worked together off and on, you know, through years and years and years and years. So they all got along really good, and it was fun. It was fun to do. There's tons of stories about that, and we watched that not too terribly long ago, and it's still good. I don't like it as much as I did in the the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't hold up as well. I mean, I don't know, there's something in it in technique and stuff, and that was our second movie, so I don't know how much.
I'd never heard of it until I was researching you to do this interview. I was like, Humps, it's got a W in it, and I was like, okay, you got Slim Pickens, who's a very funny guy, and I was like, okay.
And Chris Connolly.
Chris Connolly, yeah, he was in Benji, yeah.
He was great in that movie because he was funny, and he got to be funny, and he was, and Jack Elam was great.
Mm-hmm.
Denver Pyle was great.
Yeah.
And that is, we had my first movie set.
Okay.
I was an extra on a picture called Home from the Hill in Oxford, Mississippi, shooting in Oxford, Mississippi for Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to wonder then, were these people all crazy? Why did they come to Oxford to shoot for Texas? But Robert Mitchum was the star of that. But there was several of these guys, Denver Pyle, Cannonball,
Yeah.
whatever his last name is, and a couple of others that were, that would hang around the court square and whittle under the statue and talk about stuff and whatnot. And early on, during the week that I was an extra, at the end of the shoot, we all happened to be in the same room or something, the same batch. They said, well, we're going down to the cafe at such and such and have breakfast, because it was a night shoot. And said, you guys want to come with us? And there were two of us there that had been extras. And, oh, wow, get to eat breakfast. And we're going to a cafe that we knew, of course. And said, yeah, we go down and have steak and eggs every morning. I said, oh, cough, choke. I was getting $10 for being an extra, and I'm sure that the steak and eggs cost me that much at least. But just sitting around the table with them 2 or 3 mornings was a lot of fun. And when we did Humps, and Denver Pyle came in, not to audition per se, but just to talk and see if we liked each other and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him at some point in that interview, I said, you probably don't remember this, but you were one of my first big stars to meet. She wrote that. And so we went down and had steak and eggs with you guys 2 or 3 mornings. I was an extra on the show. He said, oh, really? No, I don't remember. And I was just crushed, because I thought that it would be great. He'd remember that. That's why he's getting an interview right now. And here I am, the director, and he did it all purely intentionally. I mean, my leaves just wilted, and he said, unless you were that funny skinny guy with the weird hat. And it was a beat up old Western hat that somebody had loaned me extra. And so we laughed about that and went on, but that was an introduction. So it'd be interesting. I'd love to hear your comments.
I gotta check.
Because that movie is the most hated and the most loved of any movie we got.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, they're and nobody's in the middle. Nobody said, yeah, that was okay.
Oh, okay.
And when we went to ABC and we were selling our entire stock at the time, library, which goes up through Double McGuffin, and he, the guy at ABC, was taking everything, including the Double McGuffin, which wasn't made yet.
Mm-hmm.
That was the purpose, is we were selling Benji for the Love of Benji and Humps to finance the Double McGuffin.
Okay.
And for several runs on ABC. And I said, you have left off Humps. Why don't you take Humps? He said, that's the worst movie I have ever seen in my life.
Well, I like No Heavenly Dog, so I'm open to checking this out.
Really? Yes. He said, yes. No way. I said, well, can we just leave the money the same and throw it in there so that, you're going to come up on a Sunday afternoon sometime when the Super Bowl's going on and you need to fill some space with something you don't care about. She said, no. And they wouldn't do it. And so it's never been on network. And it's totally and completely. And a lot of people feel that way. And we got a call one day from a theater executive, president of a chain over on the East Coast, up through the Carolinas, Virginia, and whatnot. And she put me on the phone with his executive secretary, and she said he is retiring in a couple of weeks, and we have a big retirement party for him, and we would like to show his favorite movie of all time. I said, what's that? She said, Humps. I said, you're kidding me. He said, no. I said, not only can you have a print, I'll put a big bow ribbon on it and a birthday card or whatever you want. I'll definitely send it over for you, sure. But that's kind of has always been the reaction. It's been one or the other.
Oh, wow.
Never in between. So it's pretty crazy. It is.
And then there's a Double McGuffin. I haven't seen this either, but I couldn't help but notice. I used to watch Facts of Life when I was young. Of course, Lisa Whelchel.
Yeah.
It was in your movie.
Yeah.
You talk about that.
Whelchel.
Yeah.
Well, that you would like this movie, I believe. If you like, So Heavenly Dog.
Mm-hmm.
You would like it. It's totally a caper movie.
Okay.
And it started out. It should have never been made, simply because the concept was to get two really big adult stars. And at that time, Jackie Bissett was really hot. I've forgotten who the guy is that we were going after, but they had small roles. It was all the way through the film, but they were small roles and would require, minimum of location time and all of that. Pay them, $1 million or whatever it would take to get them to do it, so that we'd have the marquee value. Because I recognized going in that the marquee value that we had with Benji, and it took a while to sell it and to really get it across. But that's part of the reason we went on tour. Was you have never before seen a dog act on the film, could literally act and express emotion on the film.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we finally got to him with that message. What is that? So because the way things sort of happened was Mom would take the kid and go see the Benji movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then she'd go back and get her husband, drag him down and say, you're coming. You got to see this. It is fantastic. And so a combination of when you walk in and to see something that you have no hope is going to be any good, and you really like it, the buzzer goes up a whole lot higher than if you walk in thinking it's going to be a 9 and it's a 9.5.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, well, it's kind of what I expected. It was good, but so that's what I think happened a lot, with Benji on all of that. Well, where's I going with that? We were
Double McGuffin.
Double McGuffin. Oh, okay. So we didn't have anything to sell the Double McGuffin with.
Okay.
It's a great caper movie.
What was it like working with Lisa Whelchel?
Oh, she was great.
Yeah.
That was early in her years, I think.
And you had Orson Welles narrating. What was that like?
Well, he did that, in his bathroom or something. We just sent him the script and he laid it down.
Yeah, George Kennedy and Ernest Borgnine. You had some good stuff behind this movie.
Yeah, I liked Ernie a lot. And George Kennedy was great.
Mm-hmm.
It was great to work with, and he is one that I was talking about earlier. He's such a good guy, and he is.
Mm-hmm.
Carolyn had contacted him. She was having a surprise birthday party for me, and he was in Atlanta shooting something and was going to be flying back on the day.
Mm-hmm.
And she talked him into flying through Dallas, stopping, getting picked up, brought to this birthday party for an hour or two, and then taken back to the airport to get the next plane on out to L.A. And he said, "Sure, I can do it." So I was sitting next to him for however long it was, an hour and a half or something, just pleased as punch that he would do that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the conversation dried up in 10 minutes flat. There was just nothing to talk about, and I'm almost never in that situation. Either you're going to be talking a lot, or I am, or we both are.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It was kind of frustrating on that side, but the kids were. I thought the kids were great. One of them is manufactured. The cowboy guy is just totally manufactured.
Mm-hmm.
He had to be edited, re-edited, swap lines on the editing table, and all kind of stuff. But the rest of the kids were super great outright, and they just stole the show. And so by the time we got down to Fish or Cut Bait,
Mm-hmm.
we had worked our way down to Ernie Borgnine and Elkie Summer, and that was our two big stars, and we should have just put the rest of the money in the bank and gone home, because it did almost no business. It got a cult going later in DVDs, but it's one of my favorite movies.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah.
Really, really, I like it a lot. And Dion Pride is Charlie Pride's kid.
Mm-hmm.
He sings the opening and closing songs well in the movie, and it's totally a caper. They come upon information that somebody is out to kill Elkie Summer, who is the prime minister of Zababubu or somewhere.
Okay.
And because they are the Huck Finns of this particular boarding school, the whole movie opens with them sneaking out the dorm to go to the swimming hole.
Oh, okay.
And George Kennedy's playing the local cop, and he shows up. All right, let's go. And we're setting the stage that they're always the ones. They're always putting something over on him, and they do a couple of times, and they make attempts and so forth. And so that is all well said. So when the time comes for them to go in and tell him about this knowledge of information that they have, he says, "Yeah, right. Get out of my office." And so they wind up really with no choice but to either let it go or try to do something themselves.
Is this movie on Blu-ray yet?
No.
No. Oh, gee, you gotta get the start going on these Blu-rays.
Well, the problem with it mostly is, it's pretty expensive to do, to go back to masters and to the film masters, start over, because everything that we had was originally mastered, 3x2 square television, because there was no such thing as widescreen back in those days.
Okay.
And there was no such thing as HD back in those days. And so that's where it stands. And so you got to go back. It was an enormous job. Fortunately, the Mill Creek, the DVD distributor, paid for, or it was part of the advance actually, for Benji and FLB to be brought back to the future and do the whole Blu-ray thing.
Yeah.
And we had to piece together, interneg and original neg and all this kind of stuff, because it, like you opened up with, it's 45 years.
Yep.
On one of them, and 43 on the other one.
Yep.
And so it gets to be really, really, really expensive. And when it's got to come at the distributor level, because if they're not willing to do it, and they wanted to do these first two, they paid for me to fly out there and do the commentaries with Brandon, whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and we gave them some pretty hefty stuff like the phenomenon of Benji and Benji at work and whatnot, or some of the special features.
Okay.
You get to see the full specials and so forth. But I just don't think the market's there. If you ask me to put up the money,
Oh.
for you to watch it, I would say don't think so. I just don't think it's there. It was for a while. It was a kind of a culty market on the DVD, but it did not even have a complete theatrical. We pulled.
Oh, wow.
We pulled it before it got too far along in the theatrical because of the expense of the theatrical, and it was just getting nothing because it didn't have any marquee value. It was. I could not come up with a way. Now, if we had Robert Redford and Paul Newman and the Sting folks in there, it might have been able to do something. But with that cast and no hook, it didn't. And maybe I just never saw it, but it was. And in that time, we were also kind of stuck in the what are we going to do thing, because we were doing a picture a year,
Mm-hmm.
and the schedules were sliding ever so rapidly to finish one, get right on the next one, and get it out by the next summer.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of our stuff is summer oriented. Kid, family at least. We've always said that Benji is not a kid picture. Benji is an adult picture the kids will enjoy.
Yeah.
And so what to get that, the thing that made Benji the hit that it was is the adults.
Yeah.
The ticket price. We ran a survey at one point on the original release of the original movie, and we had 2 adult tickets sold for every kid ticket sold at first wave in 1975.
Oh, wow.
And that's what made it work. The kid ticket price would never have done it alone.
And you did a book, Underdog.
Yeah, that is currently, the current title of that book is God Only Knows, Can You Trust Him with the Secret?
Okay.
It has had 2 or 3 different incarnations.
Mm-hmm.
Benji and Me is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically the same book but updated each time. And it is the story of how Benji came to pass and all the doors that were slammed and
Yeah.
all that it took to make it an overnight success.
Well, you know what? I really appreciate what you brought into these movies and what you that you went from Benji to working with horses, and I'll say this again. I loved Oh Heavenly Dog. I don't know. I'm gonna hold out. There'll be a Blu-ray of this. I can't see. It's got too much potential in it, But I don't know. Critics slammed it, and I'm not necessarily going to disagree with them because everybody's got their point of view. But I got mine as well, and Oh Heavenly Dog worked for me, so I appreciate the movie.
I appreciate that, and let me know if you hear anything about Blu-ray. I'd like to have a copy of it too.
Yeah, well, I watched it yesterday before, like I said, and it was just all these memories come back, and it's fun because that was the one I chose to watch before the interview. Was that one right there? So.
Well, you'd said that earlier in
Yep.
one of the emails that you really liked it, and I appreciated it then.
Yep.
And if you do watch the Double McGuffin, I'm not going to encourage you to watch Humps. If you want to do that sometime, see a real slapstick
I love slapstick.
Western comedy.
Okay.
It's that time period right after the Civil War when the cavalry was going to experiment with camels in the desert. And the experiment actually went very well, but the people who were laying the railroad to go out west beat them to it by the time they decided that yes, we want to up this camel thing. The railroad was already there or virtually there, and so they just abandoned it. And they wound up turning them loose, just out in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard of sightings every once in a while of a strange camel walking along in the desert. But we took that. I mean, the basis was true, but then we just took it and went with comedy all the way.
Well, there you go. Well, you know what? Before I let you go, I would actually before I mention, you got any charities or web pages you want to promote on here before we close off?
I would just say, to give them the the primary website, which is thesoulofahorse.com.
Okay.
And joecamp.info.
Okay.
Or joecampofficial.com, whichever you choose to use. I use joecamp.info because it's easier to say.
Okay.
So it goes to the same place.
Mm-hmm.
And Benji.com basically has been kind of taken over by Brandon, and it's just a billboard for the current movie and what's going on. But I've let him do that show. And there's a lot of stuff back behind it from the old days that is still there, but you have to go in with Benji.com/index2, I think.
Yep.
And to get to it, I don't think there's anything there that hasn't been brought forward on the Soul of a Horse in one way or another.
Okay.
And I guess our major charity would be lifepoint.org.
Okay.
Which is a church over in Alexandria, Virginia, with a kid. I say kid, he claims he's 40. Great pastor. Dressed, I mean, just today.
Mm-hmm.
He's funny, and he's, not. He dresses worse than I do. It's and he's a great seller. So we watch online every week.
Okay.
A week behind.
There you go.
Because it's that way we don't have to worry about feeding time and so forth.
Well, before I let you go, would you mind doing a plug for my show?
Hi, this is Joe Camp. I'm creator of the Canine Superstar Benji, director and writer of those movies, and you're listening to Greg Gilbert right now on Python's Paradise, New Brunswick, Canada.
Thank you so much, Joe Camp, for coming on and talking to us. And yes, some of us out here love Oh Heavenly Dog.
That's great. I appreciate it. And if you do watch Double McGuffin, let me know.
I will let you go.
And just give me a shot and say I hated it or whatever.
Well, Jeepers, it's got Lisa Wilchel in it, so I mean.
Yeah, even then. Quite something.
Yeah. Well, I bid you a good day and good luck with your horses, and God bless you.
Thank you, Greg. And you want to do it again sometime? Just give me a holler. Just come armed. That an hour usually turns into 2 or 3 around.
You know what? That's okay. That's okay. Bruce Glover went 3 hours. I'm fine with that, because people want to hear you, not me. I want to hear your stories. They want to hear your stories. So I'm fine with that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate the time and effort. And let me know when it's going to air, and I'll say something about it on the Facebook feed. So.
All right. Well, you take care, and God bless you.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.